Yo, what is going on, guys? Dr. Ethan Turner here with the Fantasy Headliners, and it's time for our Week 9 Injury Update Show. This is the show where I go through every single matchup in the NFL slate and tell you about all the injuries that you need to know about for your fantasy teams. And as usual, this show is brought to you by our friends over at Fantrax. Make sure you're downloading the Fantrax app. Let them know that the Headliners sent you using the code Headliners. But let's get into it. Week 9 Injury Update Show. Let's ride. All right, guys, sadly, we do have to start the show with not one, but two moment of silences. This is where we go through and talk about a couple guys that have been ruled out for the entire fantasy season. And we actually have two wide receivers here that have been dealing with injuries that have gotten worse and are now opting for surgery and ending their fantasy season. First up, we got Michael Thomas dealing with a turf toe surgery. We knew he was dealing with this injury. He has not played since week 3, and it just has not gotten any better. So he is opting to have surgery. He is done for the year. Absolute bummer, unless you bought our Headliner draft guide, where I told you that I would not be drafting Michael Thomas this year, given the injury history that he has had over the past few years. Second guy here, even more painful, Rashad Bateman, battling through a foot sprain, but was able to play the last 2 weeks. The problem is that the foot injury did get worse. Now we have confirmation it was a Liz Frank injury, and he is going to have season-ending surgery for his foot. Really tough break for a young wide receiver that looked very, very good in the time that he was healthy this season. But moment of silence for those two guys, Michael Thomas, Rashad Bateman. They are now droppable. They are done for the year. Now, moving on to our Week 8 inaccuracy recap. You know, every single week, I'm going to be telling you guys how I did the week before. It's just a good way to keep myself accountable. And last week, pretty solid week, 90% accurate on in-out calls, 88% on the year. So we're still trying to climb to that 90% on the year, and I'm going to keep working at it. But 90% last week, I will take it. Did have a few misses, though. James Conner, Darren Waller, both guys ended up not playing, even though I expected them to play. They were practicing, just didn't get healthy enough to play. DK Metcalf, dude is an absolute superhuman. Did not expect him to play. Actually played really, really well. Came back 14.5 points in half-point PPR scoring format. Wide receiver 13 on the week. DK Metcalf, superhuman, confirmed. David Bakhtiari ended up playing last week. Doesn't really matter because he's an offensive lineman, but I didn't expect him to. And then I did say to start Devontae Adams. Man, the flu just absolutely wrecked him last week. Finished with 1 catch for 3 yards, one of his worst fantasy outputs in a long, long time. So sorry about that one. But it wasn't all bad news. I did have some pretty good hits last week. I did tell you guys to start Deonta Foreman with Chuba Hubbard injured. 31.8 half PPR points. Absolutely massive week. But the running backs were absolutely showing out last week. Only finished as the RB5 despite over 30 points in half PPR. That is insane. Also said to start DJ Moore. He's looking really solid without CMC in that offense. 24.5 half PPR points last week. Wide receiver 5 on the week. I told you guys to start Tony Pollard. 33.2 half PPR points. RB4 on the week. Just huge week for the running backs. I said that Dalton Schultz would be a tight end 1. Did finish with 10.4 half PPR points. Good for tight end 9 on the week. So nice to see Dalton Schultz back and producing for our fantasy teams after being banged up. I also said that we were going to see some big weeks from CMC and George Kittle, especially with Debo out. Kittle finished tied with as the tight end 5 on the week, 11.5 half PPR points. And then CMC finished as the RB2 with an insane 36.3 half PPR points. Just huge, huge week for CMC. Nice to see him used in that offense as a just all-around guy. I think he threw for a touchdown last week. Absolute insanity. I hit once again on my prize pick of the week. I have not missed one of those yet this year. Jalen Waddle over 65.5 receiving yards. Huge day for him. Finished with 8 catches for 106 yards and 2 touchdowns. Wide receiver 3 in half PPR. I am just going to take all the credit for all the good positive vibes for Jalen Waddle. Hadn't scored since week 2. coming up big last week, 2 touchdowns. And I did have 2 sits. Hopefully you guys listened to. I said to sit Josh Reynolds. He was wide receiver 73 on the week. And I also told you to sit Darrell Henderson, RB 50 on the week. So overall, pretty solid week. And that's all I got for the accuracy recap and the moment of silence for week 9. All right, guys, let's get into the injuries for the week. I know there's a bunch of teams on bye. If there's somebody you want me to talk about, leave them in the comments down below. I'm not going to spend a lot of time on bye week teams. You should be taking those guys out of your lineups anyway. But if there's an injury that you really want my opinion on, leave them in the comments and I will get to them. Thursday night football, not a whole lot going on during the Thursday night game to speak of. Luckily, no new injuries, which we're always happy to see. But Brandon Cooks, Nico Collins both sat for the Texans. Cooks reportedly dealing with a wrist issue, but I think this is a pretty textbook case of I'm mad you didn't trade me itis. And so we will see what happens with that situation. I don't know what's going to happen. The team has said they're not going to release him. So Brandon Cooks playing hardball with the Texans. Sad that he is on a losing team. The Eagles just stay healthy, keep winning. Healthy teams win, and the Eagles are a pretty good example of that. Moving on to the Chargers and the Falcons. Chargers have to deal with a lot of injuries on the offensive side. Wide receiver Keenan Allen, probably the guy most people are worried about right now, dealing with a hamstring strain. Hasn't practiced yet this week. I said before the bye that I would be shocked if the Chargers threw Keenan Allen out there, and they did, and they got absolutely burnt by it. He was pulled after just 23 snaps in that game, and then came out publicly stating the injury got worse after the team's bye week while he was practicing and training during the bye week. It's pretty rare that a guy has a bye week and actually it gets worse. But that is the situation here with Keenan Allen. And he said publicly now that he is not coming back until he's at least at 100%. He wants to be completely healthy before he comes back. Says he wasn't there in week 7. Now he's waiting until he is there. Could be a few weeks, could be a month, could be 2 months. We don't know. If Keenan Allen does come back, I'm recommending that you trade him immediately because this does not look like a situation that is getting better. Wide receiver Mike Williams dealing with that high ankle sprain. Didn't practice Wednesday or Thursday. He's unlikely to play this week. I think we're still probably another 3 weeks out at a minimum with Mike Williams. Wide receiver Josh Palmer. A little bit of good news here for the offense. Had a concussion. Full practices on Wednesday and Thursday. Has been cleared. Looks like he's going to play this week. He's a pretty good spot here with Williams and Allen both expected to miss time. I kind of like him as a solid wide receiver 3 this week with a lot of targets coming his way. Speaking of a lot of targets, Austin Ekeler looking to make history by being the first guy to ever catch 10 passes, well, running back that is, to catch 10 passes in 3 straight games. He has an abdominal strain though, so we'll see what happens with that. Limited on Thursday, no designation on Wednesday. It looks like he's going to play. That this is them managing a slight issue here with Ekeler. But just know he is a little banged up. Maybe temper expectations a little bit for Austin Ekeler. But if he's playing, you have to start him. And then the kicker. The kicker has been a huge issue for the Chargers this year from an injury perspective. Dustin Hopkins dealing with a hamstring strain. Hasn't practiced yet. Doesn't look like he's going to be able to play. They had a kicker in Taylor Bertolet as their backup. He's dealing with an injury on Wednesday. Doesn't look like he's going to play this week either. So they've gone all the way back to the well, and they've picked up Cameron Dicker with a D, who recently kicked 2 field goals and 2 extra points for the Eagles in week 5. Dicker the kicker just kind of has a ring to it. I dig it. For the Falcons, running back Cordero Patterson coming off a knee scope. He's been on IR. Does look like he is on pace to come back this week from IR. They haven't officially announced that yet, but it sounds like reports are that he is going to come back. I think they could throw him straight back into bell cow status. It might not be exactly full workload because his backups have played decently. I think they're going to mix him in, but the matchup is really, really good. The Chargers are one of the worst teams in the league against the run. So I'm okay with starting Patterson as an RB2 this week if you need to do that because the matchup is pretty good. And then the Falcons did trade for a cornerback, but because their cornerback AJ Terrell is dealing with a hamstring strain, not practicing, doesn't look like he's going to play. So if there were any healthy wide receivers for the Chargers, I would tell you to play them against this Falcons team, but it just doesn't look like anything is going to happen there. We'll see what happens with Justin Herbert this week in fantasy as well. Moving on to the Dolphins at the Bears. Dolphins running back Raheem Mostert was taken off the injury report this week after dealing with a foot issue last week. Good sign for the speedy running back, but now he has to deal with a ghost from his past, Jeff Wilson, getting traded to the Dolphins. We'll see how they mix him in. Jeff Wilson, pretty much a less fast version of Raheem Mostert, kind of can do a little bit of everything. I do think that Wilson gets some run, but I don't think that it's totally going to prevent me from starting Raheem Mostert in leagues where I have to as an RB2. Wide receiver Jalen Waddle dealing with that shoulder sprain, got full practices in this week for the first time in about a month. He's locked into your lineups every single week if he's healthy. Has been playing really well as of the last 2 or 3 weeks, so definitely going to be starting Jalen Waddle even against a decent Bears defense. The Bears don't really have any injuries to talk about, so we're going to move on to the Panthers at the Bengals. Panthers running back Chuba Hubbard dealing with that ankle sprain, limited on Wednesday and Thursday, appears to be on track to play this week, which may cap Deonta Foreman a little bit, but I still think that Foreman has earned the job to be the starter, to be the primary ball carrier for the Panthers. Hubbard, I don't think is playable in fantasy until we see a solid workload with him coming back. Moving on to the Bengals, they got wide receiver Jamar Chase dealing with the pelvis/hip fracture, not practicing this week as he waits for the bone to heal. Doesn't look like he is going to play this week, and I'm thinking he's probably back after the bye week. And then cornerbacks all banged up for the Bengals right now. Chidobe Awuzie, hopefully I said that right, had an ACL tear. He's done for the year. Trey Flowers has a hamstring strain, and then Mike Hilton has a finger fracture. All of those guys not practicing as of Thursday. Very, very thin at cornerback this week for the Bengals. So I think we're setting up for a really nice DJ Moore play again, 3rd week in a row now that you can start DJ Moore in fantasy. Moving on to the Packers at the Lions. Packers wide receiver Allen Robinson, that's the wrong guy. Allen Lazard dealing with the shoulder sprain. When Lazard is healthy, he's actually not playing too bad. Currently 23rd among wide receivers in half PPR points per game. The problem is he's been fighting injuries every single week. The Lions are giving up big games to pretty much everybody that they play. So even if Lazard is a little bit limited, I do expect him to play. I think he's still an okay wide receiver 3 this week if he is playing. Lions got a few different injuries to talk about. Running back DeAndre Swift dealing with shoulder and an ankle sprain. He returned in week 8, just not really an amazing week for him, but he looks solid. Looks like he's at least somewhat getting back up to speed. 11.8 half PPR points, good for RB23 on the week. That's okay, but it's not a boom week like we were hoping for. I just don't think he's quite at 100% yet. I do expect him to play this week, but don't be surprised if Jamal Williams continues to take goal line work from DeAndre Swift as they try to keep him healthy. They're not going to be running him into the guts of defenses with Jamal Williams playing as well as he is, especially on that goal line. Wide receiver Josh Reynolds dealing with a back injury now. First it was the knee, now it's the back. Reynolds a midweek downgrade with a back injury is not really something we want to see. I think he's going to sit, and even if he doesn't, I don't think there's any way you're playing him in fantasy. And then tight end Brock Wright dealing with a concussion. Just admit it. You had no idea who the backup was for TJ Hawkinson in this offense. That's okay. I get paid to do this. I didn't have any idea who the backup was for TJ Hawkinson either. But turns out it is Wright, but he is dealing with the concussion. I think that rookie James Mitchell may take over pass catching duties for this offense eventually. He's coming off an ACL tear in college last year. He is a rookie, but he averaged over 16 yards a catch while at Virginia Tech. So keep an eye on James Mitchell. We'll see how they use these two tight ends now that TJ Hawkinson is gone. Heading over to the Raiders at the Jaguars. Raiders wide receiver Devontae Adams was sick last week. Talk about a really rough case of the flu. Adams still limited on Wednesday this week, but did return to a full session on Thursday. On track to play again, but you have to wonder what a 10-day flu does to a guy's production. He's too good to sit, but man, you just worry about, especially after last week, what he's going to do. But I'm hoping for a bounce back game against the Jags. And then tight end Darren Waller, hamstring strain. Really surprised last week when he was a late scratch. Definitely has me questioning the legitimacy of any of his back-to-back limited practices from this week. We'll see what he does. I guess I'm prepared to be hurt again because I do think he returns this week. I know I said that last week, but I think he was close, just wasn't quite there. I just hate throwing him into lineups knowing that he's not at 100%. Moving moving on, because the Jags don't really have anything to talk about injury-wise, to the Colts at the Patriots. The Colts dealing with a few different injuries at the offensive side. Running back Jonathan Taylor dealing with an ankle sprain, re-injured his ankle in week 8, and then hasn't practiced yet this week. Trended towards sitting if he doesn't practice on Friday, which is going to open the door for Deion Jackson to come back in, have a startable week. New acquisition at the trade deadline, Zach Moss. He is not good at football. Do not expect him to be a factor in fantasy or in this offense at any point this year. Quarterback Matt Ryan dealt with the AC sprain. He's already been replaced as the starter, so I guess I really shouldn't have to talk about him anymore, but just know he's not practicing. He's not even going to be the backup. Patriots wide receiver Devontae Parker dealing with a knee sprain. Parker has not practiced this week, and it doesn't look like he is likely to play this week either. Another solid week for Jakobi Meyers is imminent. Running back Damian Harris for the Patriots is dealing with an illness. Hasn't practiced yet this week. He has a bug. We know that illness is going around the league right now. It's that time of year. So Damian Harris, definitely a sit for me this week. Ramondre Stevenson looks like a pretty safe bet to be a solid RB1 again this week. All right, looking at the Bills and the Jets. Bills only have injuries on the defensive end. Jordan Poyer, free safety, dealing with an elbow injury. Poyer said that he felt a pop in his elbow. Hasn't practiced this week yet. No official word on the extent of this injury, but it's not looking good. Doesn't look like he is going to be able to play. One of the better tackling safeties in the league, so huge loss for the defense there. Cornerback Tre'Davious White, trying to come back from an ACL tear last year, was designated to return from IR, but doesn't look like he's actually going to be active this week. And then outside linebacker Matt Milano dealing with an oblique injury. Milano has been solid on the defense for the Bills, but isn't practicing after picking up this injury. Doesn't look like he's going to play unless he gets some work in on Friday. The Jets really only have one injury, and that's to Corey Davis dealing with that knee sprain. Hasn't practiced this week. Doesn't look like he's going to play. Garrett Wilson, Tyler Conklin remain really solid starts for fantasy purposes, especially with the Bills secondary hurting. So we like Garrett Wilson and Tyler Conklin this week in fantasy. I'm going to say Conklin's going to finish as a tight end 1 this week again. Moving over to the Vikings at the Commanders. Vikings don't have any injuries to talk about, so we'll move on to the Commanders. Dealing with wide receiver Jahan Dotson, has a hamstring strain, isn't practicing, doesn't look like he's going to return this week. Running back J.D. McKissick has a neck injury, hasn't been practicing this week, doesn't look like he is likely to play. Good news for Antonio Gibson, who appears to be really back in the mix now for the Commanders. Since week 6, Gibson is 13th in yards after contact and 13th in breakaway run rate among running backs, and finished as the RB24 or better in half PPR each of the last 3 weeks. So I think Gibson is startable in this matchup against the Vikings, even though the defense is pretty good. Heading over to the Seahawks at the Cardinals. Seahawks have a few injuries at wide receiver. DK Metcalf, patella tendon sprain. Apparently, he really is just a freak athlete. He played through the injury last week and now isn't even on the injury report. This was something that I was concerned could be a major issue. Doesn't look like it was a major issue at all. He's locked in as a starter with Geno Smith playing about as well as any quarterback in the league right now. Wide receiver Marquise Goodwin dealing with a groin strain. Goodwin absolutely blew up 1 week this year, but then picked up this injury. He isn't likely to play, which is actually probably good news for fantasy players because it puts both Metcalf and Lockett in really solid target shares for the week. Cardinals safety Budda Baker is dealing with an ankle sprain, isn't practicing, and is not expected to play this week. Should open things up for the Seattle offense deep. In fact, I'm going to say that Seattle's offense explodes and exposes this defense. My prize pick play of the week this week is DK Metcalf over 66.5 receiving yards. Head on over to Prize Pick, use the code Headliners for a free deposit match up to your first $100, and make sure you're betting on the DK Metcalf over this week. I don't believe I've missed on a Prize Pick play of the week so far since I started doing those, so definitely make sure you're cashing in on those over at Prize Picks. But the Cardinals also have running back James Conner dealing with a rib injury. Hasn't played since week 5, but has gotten back-to-back weeks with limited practices in. Looks like he's on pace to return this week. He's a game-time decision, though, so just make sure you're checking out our Sunday live stream to get official word on if he's playing or not. I don't love him in this matchup coming off the injury, so I'm probably still sitting him for fantasy purposes. Benjamin, though, takes a hit, going more to a flex option as opposed to a locked-in starter at running back. Rams at the Bucks should have been an amazing matchup, but both these teams struggling. Both these teams really, really need a win right now. So this is going to be a big game in terms of playoff picture for sure, because one of these teams is probably heading to missing the playoffs as it stands. Rams wide receiver Cooper Kupp, probably the biggest injury of the week, dealing with an ankle sprain. Looked pretty bad at the time of the injury, but MRI results came back relatively clean, and it sounds like and looks like Kupp is on pace to play this week. Is he 100%? No, probably not. But if you sit him, you are absolutely bolder than I am. I'm not sitting Cooper Kupp for anything. He's going to tape this up and should be able to play and should still be okay fantasy-wise. Wide receiver Van Jefferson dealing with a knee injury. Technically played last week, didn't get a target, not rosterable in redraft at this point. I just don't want anything to do with Van Jefferson. And then we got Cam Akers dealing with that bruised ego. Akers actually returned to practice despite reports that the team was actively shopping him and getting no takers for trying to shop Cam Akers. Apparently nobody wants a prima donna on their team. He's expected to play this week, a little bit surprising. And who knows, perhaps the past month of him just pouting has endeared him to the coaching staff. We don't know, but I'm going to guess probably not. But hey, if Cam Akers got dropped, maybe you can pick him up for free. Bucks dealing with a few different injuries. Tom Brady doesn't technically have an injury, but did officially announce his divorce. I do find it interesting that Brady got rest on Wednesday and Thursday for this. Probably a lot going on mentally there. I'm not going to make very many jokes about a guy getting divorced because it's just not funny, but I am curious to see if, I don't know. I guess I think that Brady may have been better off just not playing this year. It's kind of becoming a sad situation with how he's playing. The team is playing. They need a win bad, and I hope they get it this week because it could get really, really ugly in Tampa Bay. Wide receiver Mike Evans dealing with an ankle sprain that he got in week 7. He's limited, but he put up another solid week last week despite it. I think he's still locked in as a top 20 wide receiver as long as he is playing. And wide receiver Russell Gage dealing with a hamstring strain, not practicing, doesn't look like he's going to play. Chris Godwin, again, coming into a really solid floor from a target perspective. He's not 100% coming off that ACL tear, but as long as he's getting targets, he is playable, especially in leagues where you're getting points for just catching the ball, which he is doing a lot of. Heading into Sunday Night Football, we got the Titans at the Chiefs. Nice game here. Really enjoying the chance to watch this because these are two teams that are actually playing pretty well right now. So we'll see what happens. But running back Derrick Henry's got a foot injury. Should I be worried that Derrick Henry has a foot injury designation and hasn't practiced yet this week? No. The foot is fine. Those are his words, not mine. And it probably is sore because he's been carrying the team on his back all season. Quarterback Ryan Tannehill dealing with an ankle sprain, downgraded on Thursday after sitting a week. Not ideal for Ryan Tannehill. I think Tannehill's going to probably miss this game. And Malik Willis, he's going to have a really hard task this week against the Chiefs. He is going to have to hand the ball off probably 30 times to Derrick Henry. And I just hope that he doesn't get hurt doing that. Malik Willis is a good runner. I would like to see the team mix it up a little bit, let him run, maybe some designed runs. Let's see what the offense could look like with Malik Willis doing a little bit more dynamic stuff than Ryan Tannehill. But I don't think that's actually going to happen. I think he's just going to hand off to Henry like a bajillion times and hope that Henry can carry the team once again to a victory. Chiefs not really dealing with any major injuries, so we're going to move on to Monday Night Football. Ravens at the Saints. Ravens tight end Mark Andrews, probably the most important injury from this matchup, dealing with knee and shoulder injuries. Didn't practice on Thursday after getting hurt in last Thursday's game. He is trending towards not playing despite all the rest, which makes Isaiah Likely a really nice start. Probably a tight end 1 again this week. Running back Gus Edwards is dealing with a hamstring strain. Went down pretty hard with a classic post ACL hamstring strain. We talk about these all the time. He is not practicing yet. Doesn't look like he's going to play. If I had to guess, the team has said it wasn't as bad as what it looked, but I still think we're probably looking at 2 to 6 weeks with this hamstring injury for Gus Edwards. Kenyon Drake becoming a really interesting RB2 in a tough matchup, despite the fact that the Saints are pretty good on defense. I still think Kenyon Drake is going to have plenty of opportunities to run the rock and score some fantasy points. I know we talked about Rashad Bateman in the moment of silence. He's done for the year, but just wanted to kind of take some time here to mention that Devin Duvernay is second on the team in receiving and needs to be rostered in leagues where you have deeper benches if he is available, because Devin Duvernay should still get plenty of opportunities in this offense. And with Mark Andrews hurt, we could see Devin Duvernay even taking an even bigger role in this offense, and he could be streamable as kind of a wide receiver 3 week to week. Saints dealing with a few different injuries. Wide receiver Jarvis Landry has an ankle sprain that has kept him out for a while now. He's back practicing. Looks like he's going to be able to play. Not startable in fantasy yet, but I have found him on waiver wires, and with MT out for the year, like we talked about earlier, I wouldn't be shocked if Jarvis Landry has a pretty solid PPR floor when he's back and fully healthy. Running back Mark Ingram dealing with a knee sprain. Ingram's not likely to play this week due to this injury. Could be another huge week for the Week 8 RB1 Alvin Kamara, who put up over 40 points in half PPR for a running back. That is just craziness. And then last up for the Saints, cornerback Marshawn Lattimore dealing with the abdominal injury. Isn't practicing yet after missing a few weeks with this issue. I doubt the Ravens can really capitalize on his absence because they have so many injuries at the wide receiver position and tight end position, but we'll see. Maybe Isaiah Likely can put up a really, really nice week, or maybe Devin Duvernay can do it. So that's all we got for the injury updates this week. Hope you guys enjoyed it. That's it, guys. Week 9 injury update show is in the books. And hey, I've been reading the comments, and I get it. There's some people talking about how I am not as high energy as my boys Jake and Kyle, and I understand that, but you have to realize that it's not always the most exciting thing in the world to talk about injuries, but we have to do it. We have to give you guys this injury update, and it hurts me too because I have fantasy teams, and when I'm talking about a guy being hurt and being done for the year like a Rashad Bateman, it hurts me too to talk about that. So it's hard to get excited at a funeral. I'm sorry. It's hard to do. I can't be as excited as Jake and Kyle are talking about fantasy because they get to talk about these guys scoring loads of points and I have to talk about how they're not going to play. But because I want to interact with you guys a little bit more, let me know in the comments, special request, let me know in the comments which injury this year has hurt you the most. If I had to guess, for me personally, Javonte Williams going down with the ACL tear has absolutely killed some of my fantasy teams. Just a huge bummer for him. Hate seeing young guys get hurt, but that one really, really hurt a few fantasy squads of mine that are just not able to come back from that, and I just have not been able to find a good, suitable replacement for Javonte Williams yet this year. So that's mine personally. Let me know in the comments. We'll have a big old pity party in the comments for these injuries because they suck. We don't want these guys to be injured, and it hurts for me to talk about them every single week because I just know that I'm bringing bad news most of the time. But if you appreciate this effort, if you appreciate me going out there letting you guys know the bad news, make sure you like the video, subscribe to the channel, and hit the notification button so you can get these weekly injury updates each and every week. Appreciate our sponsors, Fantrax, Prize Picks, and if you got some time, head on over to Manscaped. Use the code Headliners, 20% off and free shipping. Christmas right around the corner. Get your guys some nice stuff over there. They've got some nice high quality products, and I think you guys will enjoy them. But that's all I got for you guys this week. Week 9 injury update show in the books. The doc is out.